Hey everybody, I'm so excited to introduce my friend Kim to you. Kim Zuroff is our special guest. She's the Director of Growth for The One Thing. She's an executive leadership coach and a very accomplished business leader. And we're going to talk about a lot of things I think really are probably swirling around in your head and things that are showing up in your day to day. And Kim, I'm really glad that you could join me today and just have this chat really about what it's like to try to get to the next thing or the next level in business and in life.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure.
Yeah. You actually just went to your next level or next thing not that long ago as the Chief Growth Officer of The One Thing. How long has that been now?
Yeah, so I've been the director of growth since last fall, September, October timeframe.
What has this new opportunity shown you about yourself and about your leadership?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is that there's transferable skills to anything. Transitioning into what I'm doing now, there's still the core fundamental foundational things that still come into play with any role that has to do with growth, has to do with sales, right? So I still do a lot of the same things that I was doing before I transitioned into this role. So there's some things that don't change.
Sure.
And yeah, a few other things. It's just that it's really fun as a leader to be a beginner again. Sometimes we get used to achieving high performance and you become known for that. And then all of a sudden you're a beginner again and you get to learn a lot in that process.
Yeah, I love that. It's okay to give yourself permission to feel like you're new at something.
100%.
We use the term leadership all the time. What qualities do you believe are essential for leaders who want to create a lasting impact, not just get results, but really want to create that impact and be significant to the people around them?
I think the biggest thing for leaders is learning how to ask great questions
Mm,
because when you're able to teach people how to think versus tell them what to do, it'll have a more impactful, lasting impression on them because they self discovered whatever it is that they needed to discover versus you just telling them.
yeah. And when you think back over your career, has your definition of success evolved?
I think it for sure has. For me, like in the early part of my journey as a leader, leading brokerages and different things, it was to achieve certain results, right? Like numbers, performance, profit. And for a large time, I was chasing certain personal goals, personal metrics of net worth, this, that, the other thing. It's evolved over time just with life experience, going through some hard things, and it's transitioned into more time, right? So success to me is time freedom and the freedom and ability to do what I want with who I want when I want to do it. And that's what success looks like now versus success was hit these numbers and I'll be happy. So
Yeah.
for sure evolved over time.
Can you remember what it was like when you first started in leadership? What advice would you give to someone who might be listening, who maybe they're just figuring out they're a leader or they're actually intentional right now about developing their leadership and creating a career path around it? Is there anything you would share with them right now based on looking back and having experienced things and probably failing forward at times?
Yeah, I failed forward a lot. And so
Me too.
yeah, and so I think that one of the biggest things, Anna, is have grace with yourself. And the advice I would give really is don't attach your identity to any kind of number, any kind of role, any kind of title, and don't forget who you are on the journey. And I think that's really important and understanding your core values and being able to attach your core values to your purpose and your priorities of every day, I think is super important. That's my number one piece of advice as you're embarking on the leadership journey. Don't attach your worth, your identity, or anything else to any kind of outcome or results.
That is great advice. And in the world that we are in, there's a lot of attention to the results and to the numbers. And sometimes I think I'll speak for myself, being someone who's very passionate about what I know I can contribute or how I can contribute, being committed to the goal, you can get lost in that sometimes. And I think that it is important to remember that you have a much bigger identity in the world and a much bigger plan for yourself and the gifts that you can give than your worst day, than the day that had you crying in the car, if we're all going to be transparent, or even just saying, why am I doing this? Right? Because we all have those moments too. So I appreciate that. And I think there's someone who needs to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, it's not about not getting results or settling. What I'm saying is still work to achieve results, but have grace
Sure.
with yourself along the way. Because I know for me in my early leadership journey, I wasted so much energy on beating myself up. And it's just like you can't beat yourself up into greatness. You can't. And the energy that you spend doing that could be channeled into doing things that will get you the results that you're really after. Hey, strive for results, have grace, don't beat yourself up because it's wasted energy at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about your journey now into the one thing, which is super
Yeah.
exciting. When was the first time you picked up the book, The One Thing?
Right when it came out in 2012.
So, what about the writings in the book or the principles in the book? What really connected with you? And to then now see so many years later that you're an integral part of the organization.
Yeah, I think one of the things that resonated the most is success is sequential, not simultaneous. In my early leadership days, I would stack everything on top of each other. And then I would have a wild amount of anxiety. And it wasn't until I figured out through the one thing that if you line up your dominoes instead of stack them on top of each other, you can reprioritize and be focused on the one thing that matters the most in that moment. And that can be a catalyst to knocking down the other dominoes. And so I think that was one of the principles that really stood out early on. And then things like the four thieves of productivity and the purpose, priorities, and productivity graphic that's in the book. Those are like three things that have really helped me along my way.
So you mentioned a few things there. The four thieves of productivity for
Yeah.
someone who hasn't read the book.
Yeah.
Maybe you could expand on that a little bit because it sounds like that had a big impact on you. And I'm sure it showed up in your day to day. And it did for me. I know when I read that, I was like, oh, there it is.
There it is. Yeah, so the four thieves of productivity. The first one is the inability to say no. Jay and Gary placed that one first because most people thought that would be the thing. And it is a lot of people's thing where we say yes to too many things and then we're saying no to the things that actually matter the most to us. And one of the principles they talk about in the book relative to that is every yes has to be defended by 1,000 no's. And so be really sure on what you're saying yes to because you're going to have to subsequently say no to a lot more things. The second thief of productivity is the fear of chaos. Now, this is the entrepreneur that says, I can't silence my notifications. I can't shut down my email because if I do that for a period of time while I focus on my one thing, absolute chaos is going to ensue. And the third thief of productivity is poor health habits. Big goals require big energy. And if we're not fueling our bodies to take care of ourselves, to give us the amount of energy we need, that can be a thief of productivity. And then the last thief of productivity, which is actually a bigger thief than most people will admit, is your environment doesn't match your goals. Now, it's not just your physical environment, it's the environment of the people you surround yourself with. It's the content that you consume, the books you read, the podcasts you
Yeah.
listen to. And so oftentimes, like a lot of times people say the inability to say no is their biggest thief. Whereas if they actually fixed their environment and built their bunker and protected their time even better, then everything else would be easier versus their inability to say no.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that there are things when we examine what could get in our way of being more effective or more purposeful, as the one thing talks about, it's just really being honest and understanding that in the awareness, you find the solution. Did you personally struggle with any of those, or do you find that there's one that, is a thief that creeps up more often for you personally?
I think they've all been thieves at different parts of my journey, right? I think the initial thing that I struggled with was the environment. I had to really change my inner circle and who I was spending the most amount of time with. It's asking myself the question, is this engagement or is this person I'm spending time with moving me closer or further away to my goals?
Yeah, and
How
that's
do I?
hard for a lot of people to really address, I'm sure.
It is, especially if it's your family.
Yeah.
One of the questions that I asked one of my mentors, probably when I was 22 or 23, if there's somebody in your inner circle that you know you need to spend less time with because it's not healthy for you, how do you how do you tell them? And my mentor at the time was like, Kim, You don't tell them. You just politely decline invitations. You just show up less.
Create a little space.
And
Yeah.
you just create the space. You don't have to call them and say, "Hey, you're not healthy for me to be spending a lot of time with, so we got to stop hanging out." You can be a lot more passive than that.
Yeah, for sure. But yet it's important. So Kim, in your experience coaching leaders, what's the most common barrier that prevents people from really focusing on their one thing?
It's a few things. So, one of the biggest barriers is creative avoidance and focusing on 80% tasks because they're more fun. A lot of times, our 20% activities, like, they're not fun. They're actually really boring. And so, one of the biggest things that gets in the way of leaders and founders and entrepreneurs is the busy work, the shiny objects, and saying yes to the things that they shouldn't be. And when they're saying yes to those shiny objects in the 80%, they're saying no to their 20% and the most important things. And that's one of the biggest barriers that I often see as a coach and as a leader.
Yeah. And I probably should ask this question first because there could be someone listening who's not familiar with the book or really what we mean by the one thing. And I have talked about it here on Mojo before. How do you help someone understand what we mean by the one thing?
Yeah, so it's in order to have more, it's not necessarily by doing more, it's actually by doing less. And
Totally, I think for someone listening is what? Say that again? That seems so counterintuitive.
yeah, the secret to getting more is not by doing more, it's actually by doing less and prioritizing what you have. Let's just talk about the different areas of life that we have, right? We've got the spiritual, we've got health, we've got our personal lives, we got businesses, we've got relationships, we've got our financials. So we have several different buckets in life that we're dealing with. And oftentimes we have several priorities in each of those buckets. And so identifying your one thing is asking yourself the question of what's the one thing that I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary. A lot of times, if people pick their top 3 priorities out of the 7 circles, let's just say, for example, it's their health, their business, and their key relationships. I then ask the question, one thing, which one of those is going to drive everything else? So
So are you looking to pick one thing overall, or is it one thing in each area? Because a lot of times we feel pulled in so many directions.
Yeah.
And as you said, we have all these different dimensions to our life. So is it identifying the one thing in each area, or is it really one overall?
So I always challenge people to identify the one in each area, but then you have to prioritize which one are you going to focus on first, because you can't really focus on all of the things at once and do anything really well. And so it's taking your top 3 priorities of, okay, when I focus on this one thing, which one of these things will be the catalyst to everything else being easier or unnecessary? At different points in my journey, health was the number one thing because I knew if I had my health right, I had the energy to be able to do my business and my relationships great. So it's taking the different areas of life or different one things and asking yourself which one of these things, when I focus on it, is going to make everything else easier or unnecessary.
It's such a powerful question. I found that, and I've read the book a couple times, or sometimes I just pull parts of the book out when I need it.
Yeah.
And I feel like for me, the impact it's had on me helped me to create some equalizing in my life. And I think if you can work through this concept of the one thing, you could avoid burnout more easily than because as I said, we're all trying to do a lot. And I think that some of us are wired to feel like the more I'm doing, or the more boxes I check off during the day, then the more productive I'm being. But it's just the opposite. And so I find like this lens helps us to, as you say, do more in less time and to achieve bigger results than really. I always get that image of an octopus with 8 arms out there trying to grab a little bit of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to one of the points that we talked about early on is the geometric progression. So
Mhm.
there's been a lot of study and research done that when you line up your dominoes, when you flick the first one, it not only can knock down one equal of size, but it can knock down a domino almost 50% bigger than the first domino. And so by the time that you get to the 31st domino, you're as tall as the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And so you think about the power of focusing on your one thing. So it's really taking your priorities and lining them up in order of importance, because each thing standing is a certain amount of potential energy that when you knock down the first one, it'll give you the energy and everything else to get the second, the third, and the fourth. So I think it's lining them up versus stacking them up. And I think you're going to notice a big difference.
So, Kim, how can organizations as a whole apply the one thing philosophy to really look at how they're creating a culture of focus and purpose-driven action?
Yeah, I think the way that organizations can apply the one thing is largely through the goal setting to the now process. One of the challenges that organizations often have is they say, "Hey, we're all not rowing the boat in the same direction." And when we focus on working our goals backwards so that everybody's clear about the vision of where we're going, it's starting, where do I want to be someday? 5 years, 10 years, and working it all the way backwards to today. And when you take an organization, a business, a company, an individual through that goal setting process, there's a lot of power and there's a lot of clarity that comes within that process alone. And so if an organization's like, where do I start? That would be the place that I would start is, let's start with goal setting to the now, core values, and some of the fundamental things that we have here at the One Thing.
And do you think that there's an opportunity for companies to really look at applying some of these principles in everything they do? Or is it, I think sometimes people look at this and say, okay, this must just apply to strategic planning, goal setting. How does this transcend into every aspect of the company's culture?
Yeah, it transcends into every aspect. So a big part of the One Thing is people knowing how to prioritize, being able to focus on the things that are most important, that are going to be the biggest pushes in the needle moving forward, right? And so when we go into organizations, across all industries, and one of the biggest challenges that people have is they say, hey, if our team members could focus better, be clear on their priorities, and learn how to manage their time throughout the day, our organization would increase by X% in productivity. And so the principles of the One Thing, we're focused on helping people get really clear on what their priorities are. And sometimes people are like, wow, I didn't realize that these were my priorities. I was focused on these things over here, which weren't,
Yeah.
you
I
know.
have to tell you, as a leader, I hear that often in our team. Like, just actually happened the other day. I was reviewing someone's Q2 strategic plan, and she was struggling a little bit with what her priorities would be. And I think it's a fair question because things are changing around us all the time.
Yeah.
So it's not, I don't look at that person and say, oh my gosh, how could they not know what the goals are? It's that something probably shifted around them that has them questioning, did my priorities now get put in a different order? And I think we live in a culture that still glorifies the hustle a lot, or at least for in my generation, that was a big part of how we grew up in business. For me, it was always trying to prove how much I could multitask, how much I could grind and hustle. And if you were feeling burnt out, it meant you were probably a rock star. But now, as I've gotten further into my career and over the age of 50, I value different things. And I feel there must be another option. And so I don't know if that's come up for you in coaching business leaders, because I find that there are signs you got to look for. Because sometimes what looks to be someone who's really put together on the outside and who looks like they're succeeding at a high level, they might feel like a hot mess on the inside. So how do we help people? And are there ways to look for that? I know I packed a lot into that question, but it really is something that I deal with a lot as a business leader.
Yeah, I totally get it. And a lot of my culture too, you get the gold star for the grind, the hustle, the amount of hours you worked. And I think that, how do you recognize it? I would hope that people recognize it before it's too late. And I think for me personally, part of my journey is like I had an awakening with just a really hard personal thing happened, right? I lost my mom to cancer. That was almost like a wake up call, right? So I had been grinding really hard for 12, 13 years. And I missed a lot of things that, looking back, could have I had different priorities in those moments? And the answer is yes. And so sometimes we have to go through our own journeys to identify that our priorities are backwards. And
Mm.
yet, I think the biggest thing there is just, for me, at one point, I understood work's not going away. It's going to be there tomorrow. And you have to really pay attention to, what are you sacrificing? Are you sacrificing your health? Are you sacrificing your relationships? What else in your life are you sacrificing to get where you want to go? And is it worth it? Because in most cases, it'll probably be no. And so I would challenge everybody to take a look at their own personal situation and say, every day, every week, every month, of based on the goals that I was after, like, what did I do in my personal life for my health, for my personal care, in addition to achieve the business goals? And so I think, like, one of the things that helped me start to do that is like really leaning into the 411, because then I'm looking at it every single week of, what am I doing for my personal life? What am I doing for my health? What am I doing for? So it's not just being missed.
So the 401 is a big part of our daily world here at Keller Williams, and
Yeah.
Rick talked about in the one thing, and I know on the website you have some reference material. So for anyone listening who's like, the what? How would you explain the 411 and encourage someone to make that a part of their weekly habit?
Yeah, so it's a weekly accountability tool. And not just an accountability tool, it's also a weekly reflection tool, because you're able to see what went really well. What are the opportunities? Like, what do I need to do this week that I missed last week? Because one of the big calendar things is, if you erase, you replace. 411. So 4 weeks, 1 month, 1 year. So there's 4 weeks in a month, 1 month at a time. So January, February, March, right? You're going to have a 411 for each month. But then you're going to have your annual goals that are at the top of the 411 that stay consistent throughout the year. And so essentially what that looks like is, every month you're saying, what are the top 20% activities that I need to do this month in order to hit my annual goals? And breaking it down even further into, what are the top 20% activities I need to do this week for me to hit my monthly goals? And what we know is that when you check the box, or you highlight it, or you cross it off, meaning that you did it, is when you do those activities on a weekly, monthly basis, you're going to reach your annual goals. And so it's a metric or a tool to help you reach your goals in a systematic way.
Yeah, totally. The list each week is short. It's not like you're putting in a whole laundry list of things. I always tell people, this is not your to-do list, because some people struggle. Oh, I only have 3 things here. Perfect. That probably represents your 20%. It should be short, but those are the things that pack a punch. They're going to get you closer to your goal. And so that is something I do myself every week too. And I love how it helps me chunk down, because sometimes when you have that yearly goal, it can feel very big. It can feel almost overwhelming. And I think for some people that are listening right now, this is a great way to help you chunk it down. And I think also avoid some things we were talking about earlier, the burnout, how to protect your energy, which is huge. I know for me, I focus on my energy all the time. How do you personally protect your energy, Kim? What are some things that you do to create more flow or balance in your life? Because you're running at a high level every day.
Yeah, I run at a high level, not just professionally, personally. Like, I do a lot of endurance athlete stuff.
Literally running every day.
Literally. So I think the important part for me is making sure that I have time in the morning and night to, I call it thinking time. So in the morning, I just get my intentions straight, right? So thinking about some gratitude, thinking about the priorities for the day. At the end of the day, I have a little bit of a window of reflection time where I ask myself a few questions. Those questions I ask are, what went really well today? What are some things that are opportunities that maybe didn't go so well? And what's one thing that I'm really excited about that happened today? And so I ask myself some reflection questions just to think about what I can continuously improve on the next day and going forward. But protecting that energy, it's really boundaries with personal time. So communicating boundaries, making sure that I'm getting enough sleep each night. I don't sleep with my phone in my room. I used to, and it used to be like a huge struggle, but I just found that I was checking email first thing in the morning. And when you check for email first thing in the morning, before you even get out of bed, those emails tend to structure your morning routine for you. And so for me, it's like I shifted away from that. My phone's not even in my room. I get up and I do my morning routine before I look at my email. And that's made a huge change in my energy, because it's like I'm able to do the things that I know give me energy. And that's a little bit of reading time. That's my workouts in the morning, all done before I dive into work.
That's great. And are there ever days you miss it? I'm just going to be honest. I just want to know if there is a day that you're like, oh my gosh, I am so off my routine. Because I know you sound pretty disciplined.
Yeah, though there's days that my routine gets rocked. It's like we're human, we're not perfect. One thing that Jay often says is it's okay to have an off day, just make sure it's
Good.
not 2 days in a row.
Oh, okay. I can live with that. I love that too. That's
Yeah,
pretty.
because your normal habits, right? If you miss a day, okay, get on the rocker the next day because each day that gets stacked on top of not doing your routine or not doing the things you said you were going to, it just the separation becomes too big to where you just completely fall off the horse.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for some of us, we get maybe even overwhelmed at the thought of trying to be perfect. And we have to give ourselves that grace to say, okay, so you had a day where you were off. And like you said, tomorrow I'll get back on track.
Yeah, there was one week where Monday came around. Every Monday, I have my accountability sessions with Jay, and I sign into the accountability. And he's like, "Let's talk about your 401." And I said, "We can't because I forgot to do it." I just like other things just popped up, but it's happened once. So it's like we're all human. Like we all have days where we forget, or maybe for my workouts, maybe my body's just not feeling it that day. And I listen to my body and I just make sure that it's not multiple days in a row.
Yeah, because I think the goal is always about progress, not perfection.
100%.
Yeah. Kim, looking ahead, what's exciting you most right now when it comes to leadership or your own personal growth?
Yeah, I think what's exciting me the most is just continuing to explore what the outer limits look like. So pushing myself personally and professionally. Our bodies are incredible and what we can do. So excited about just the different things I'm doing to push myself. Specifically within leadership, what I'm excited is the continued growth of just being better, getting even better at asking great questions, continuing to coach and serve the people that I get to coach, speaking in terms of helping businesses, organizations with their leadership, their productivity, their focus. I get to come do something with your team, which I'm super excited about.
Yeah, you're going to be in New York soon. I'm so happy.
Yeah, just more of that, but just embracing the journey and appreciating each step along the way.
Excellent. Okay, I have to ask, I guess we'll say finally, I'll ask, what's your personal one thing right now? That one thing that's really lighting you up and moving you forward. What is it?
Yeah, the one thing I'm focused on right now is my health. And because I know that's the biggest domino of when I take care of that, I'm going to succeed even more in business. I'm going to succeed even more in my relationships. I'm going to succeed even more. So right now I'm focused. My one thing this year is my health.
Yeah, I love it. So I love that we shared some things that really line up with what I saw as my vision and intention for even starting this podcast. Calling it Monday Morning Mojo was so that we could share things on this platform that could kick off someone's week with purpose and strategy, but a little inspiration. And I think that you've done that for a lot of people listening today. And if someone would like to have a little bit more, Kim, if they would like to learn more about you or the one thing, how can they find you?
Yeah, they can find me. The best way to find me is going to be on Instagram. And it's just my name, Kim Zuroff. That's Instagram. Same thing on LinkedIn. My handles are pretty easy to find. If you'd like to access the free resources with the one thing, you can visit theonething.com, which is the number one thing.com. And that's the best way to reach me.
Yeah, we'll make sure to link that in the show notes too, because there are some really great resources on the website.
Yeah.
So, Kim, I just want to thank you for sharing your wisdom, your story, and your energy with us today. I think there were a lot of golden nuggets that you dropped along the way, from identifying priorities and honing your energy and just leading a little bit more with clarity. So, I really appreciate that. I always love spending time with you. And for all of you out there, if you're listening and feeling inspired to focus on your one thing, just remember clarity comes from action. So I'll leave you with this thought. What's one small step you could take today that aligns with your biggest goal or deepest value? Start there. So again, if this episode has resonated with you, please share it with a friend and leave a review. I appreciate that. It helps us spread more mojo. And we love really including more amazing entrepreneurs and leaders just like you. And then don't forget, follow Kim and the one thing too. All the links will be in the show notes. So thanks again, Kim. I'll see you all next time.
Pleasure.